There's a technique out there that is so simple, so basic, and yet it packs so much impact that most people ignore it because it just sounds too good. Now, I know it works because I've been using it and its variations for more than a decade, and always with great results. It brings clarity, productivity, and saves tons of time. Today we're going to go over the Pomodoro Technique. It's not for everyone, so we will also discuss who, when, and where should use it. But by the end of the video, you will have a solid grasp on it and you will be ready to change your own professional life. My name is Marcel. I'm a chartered manager who, over the last 2 decades, managed endless projects, from operational to commercial ones, and this setup works everywhere if you know how to implement it. Most people first come across it when they're feeling stuck rather than lazy. They sit down with good intentions and they're fully aware of what needs to be done, but somehow the work never quite starts. Time passes, energy leaks away, and by the end of the day, there's a vague sense of really being busy without having anything concrete to show for it. Perhaps some scrolling took place, maybe it were genuine business calls, but somehow the evening arrived with you not moving an inch. That's the exact problem that Pomodoro Technique was created to address. At its core, the technique is about working in short, deliberate bursts of focus, traditionally 25 minutes at a time, followed by short breaks. After 4 of these cycles, you can step away for a longer rest. That's the entire structure. There's no complexity hiding behind it, which is precisely why it works as well as it does. What's interesting is where the idea came from. The technique was developed in late 1980s by Francesco Cirillo, who was a university student struggling to concentrate long enough to study properly. We've all been there, but instead of trying to force himself into hours of focus, he experimented with committing to very small, defined periods of work. He used a simple kitchen timer shaped like a tomato, which is Pomodoro in Italian, and challenged himself to stay present until it rang. The timer itself wasn't the breakthrough. The shift in mindset was. And this is what is so great about the whole technique. Instead of asking himself whether he can study all afternoon, he asked whether he could focus for just a short while. That change lowered the psychological barrier to starting, which is where most productivity systems will quietly fail. Imagine someone telling you that you have to climb 20 floors using stairs. Now, I used to work in offices on the 19th floor, and I know how challenging this is. Climbing 20 floors sounds almost impossible, but if you tell yourself you have to climb 2 floors, that is something doable. After you get there, you rest a little and you climb only 2 more, and then only 2 more. When people struggle with productivity, it's rarely because they don't know what to do. More often, it's because tasks feel endless and undefined. Work on presentation or write a report. Well, they sound reasonable on paper, but to the brain, those instructions are vague and heavy. There's no clear endpoint, and that makes avoidance, well, oddly sensible. Pomodoro reframes the problem. You're no longer committing to finishing something. You're committing to showing up fully for the next 25 minutes only. And that's all. That's a much easier promise to keep, even on days when motivation is low. The time limit plays a bigger role than most people realize. Once the timer starts, the internal negotiations stops. You're no longer deciding whether to check a message, switch tasks, or take a break. It's just non-negotiable. You simply don't. These decisions have already been made in advance. For the next block of time, this is the only thing that matters for you. That reduction in mental friction is where the real benefit lies. The breaks become different too. They're no longer rewards, they're structural. The short, regular breaks prevent cognitive fatigue from quietly building up and pushing you back into distraction. They also teach your brain that rest is coming, which makes it easier to stay engaged while you're working. Pomodoro tends to work particularly well for tasks that are mentally demanding but emotionally resistible. Things like writing, studying, planning, admin work, learning new material, especially the kind of tasks that you keep postponing because they feel bigger than they actually are. It's also very effective for people who struggle with procrastination, driven by overwhelm rather than laziness. That's why the technique is often recommended to students and early career professionals. It helps build focused stamina in a structured, forgiving way. Over time, many people naturally increase their focus window, but Pomodoro provides a safe starting point. Now, that said, it's not a universal solution, so there are limitations. For work that requires deep immersion, the kind where you lose track of time, rigid 25-minute cutoffs can feel disruptive. Strategy work, creative design, complex problem solving, and deep technical tasks often benefit from those longer, uninterrupted stretches of thought. In those cases, Pomodoro can interrupt momentum rather than support it. This is where people often go wrong. They treat the technique as a rule instead of a tool. If the timer goes off and you're in a genuine flow state, there is nothing sacred about stopping. The structure exists to help you begin and stay focused, not to pull you out of productive work for the sake of consistency. Used properly, Pomodoro is flexible. I know that I much more prefer having 45-minute batches than 25-minute ones. I learned that it works better for me in the morning than it does in the evening when I'm just drained. So you have to treat it as a tool and adjust when needed. In practice, using it well starts with choosing a single concrete task, not a category or a vague intention, but something specific enough that progress is obvious. You remove the most obvious distractions, you start the timer and work on that one thing, just one thing, until it ends. And when it does, you stop, step away briefly, and then decide whether to continue or to switch. Now, many people adjust the timings as they gain experience. 40 minutes or 10 minutes, 50 and 10 off, even 90 and 20. The exact numbers are far less important than the underlying rhythm. Focused effort followed by intentional recovery. Pomodoro also fits best when tasks are batched rather than scattered throughout the day. Instead of reacting constantly, you give different types of work their own containers. Now, emails may get a couple of blocks, writing will get a few, planning gets one, and that structure alone can turn a chaotic day into something that feels deliberate and controlled. Of course, there are limits. Pomodoro doesn't work well in highly reactive roles, where constant interruptions are just unavoidable. It completely fails if your role is purely operational without planning elements. It doesn't help with prioritization. It makes you more focused, not wise about what deserves that focus. And for some people, timers create pressure rather than clarity, which is a sign that the system needs adjusting or abandoning altogether. The real value of the Pomodoro technique isn't the timer or the intervals. It's the way it teaches you to work with your attention instead of against it. It reminds you that focus is finite, that starting is often harder than continuing, and that structure usually beats willpower. It's a simple idea, but the skill it builds is anything but simple. If you found this episode helpful or have your own experiences of using Pomodoro, please let me know. Like, subscribe, share and comment, and I'll see you in the next one.